Hello, and welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Monjurul Kabir. Dr. Kabir is a political scientist and foreign policy expert. He is currently a senior UN coordination advisor and global team leader on gender equality, disability inclusion, and intersectionality at UN Women. He is also a human rights lawyer by training and Shivaning scholar. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Monjurul Kabir.
Likewise, Courtney.
Dr. Kabir, it is an absolute honor for you to be on this podcast episode today. I have to let our listeners know that today we are going to be talking a lot about career. So, Plenty of Positivity has three components: life, sport, and career. So, we're going to be focusing a lot on career and perhaps life for that matter. And then also taking a deep dive into leadership. So I want to dive right into it, Dr. Kabir. So if you could please begin with an introduction and background of yourself.
Thank you very much. It is likewise an absolute pleasure to meet you and to be able to speak to you. Because one thing we all learn, I don't know about all others, but at least I learned is it is only through communication and communicating both internally and externally we can learn and progress. Because without communication, whatever you are gathering becomes much more inward looking. Now, in terms of introducing myself, you have very kindly already introduced me. I would only say this, I'm sort of sometimes I see myself as a very ordinary person in an extraordinary time. Now, the reason I'm saying extraordinary time is not only in a political terms, but if you look around us, wherever we are, any person, any part of the world is going through a lot of changes. Now, people might say, changes are constant. That is true. But some of the values, some of the achievement we thought are achieved are now again becoming a target of question. Many things are newly redefined. Um, Economic progression has reached a new level of uncertainty. We also have the combination of artificial intelligence, which is challenging sometimes human innovation and the role of human being as such. While I'm not against artificial intelligence by no means, but I also see how the societal progress and the values and the way we used to uh, do things are changing. And are we really, the big question in the room or elephant in the room is, are we really prepared to embrace that change? Because to embrace that change, we need to prepare ourselves also. And sometimes without preparing ourselves, we embrace certain changes which outcome of which we are not aware of fully. So that's why I say that I'm also an avid learner, an ordinary person in such an extraordinary environment and the world we live in now today.
Absolutely. And I just want to really emphasize what you're speaking about when it comes to technology. Without a doubt, the change that is occurring daily. I mean,
Mhm.
to stay up with it, I'm reading as fast as I can with anything that deals with AI. And I think it's so critical, as you mentioned, continued learning, especially now. It's always been very important, but I think
Absolutely.
more so than ever, staying up on how you could utilize technology ethically. How could it enhance your work? Not substitute, but enhance it. And so, just leading into my next question, it does certainly involve technology, but in what ways could we utilize technology and how could it be leveraged to advance equality without reinforcing existing inequalities?
Mhm. Now, I think you're raising a very important question because initially, even in the couple of 20 years ago or 10 years ago, people always thought that technology is positive, which it is, but technology is something to do good and it will eliminate exclusion, address lack of inclusion and other challenges. But it's not automatic, we realize that. Because if you look at even the use of artificial intelligence in, for example, a recruitment process, many organizations nowadays use artificial intelligence to do the initial um, sort of shortlisting or categorization of candidate or creating a pool of applicant for a job. I'm just picking up one example. And we had opportunity to look into certain process, and we realized that when we let AI run the show in terms of the initial creation of a pool for us to consider, there are many individuals are eliminated based on certain criteria that were probably fixed without thinking of artificial intelligence application. For example, we have seen that there is a systemic approach of excluding certain background of uh, people who are coming from a certain zip code, as they call it in US, or economic background or ethnicity, sometime with disability, sometime with sexual identity, sometime with certain other elements. And this is not something we probably wanted. We wanted a much more inclusive, robust process. But it's happened because we probably were not ready or we didn't uh, guide the whole process sufficient. Now, that's just one example. But if you look around, you will find that technology is a great enabler, and this is really helpful. But if you are not in the driving seat based on the values that you stand up for, uh, then technology will drive you. There is nothing wrong in certain cases that we might be driven by technology if it is an area which require a lot more innovation, a lot more examination, assessment. Then of course at some point you have to wait and see how it is offering you some solution, and then you apply your mind. But if you allow technology to drive you in decision making in public policy without looking into the challenges and some of the aspects of intersectional challenges, as I might call them, then technology might either eliminate them or they make a decision for you which might not be inclusive. I'm not saying every time they will be exclusive. All I'm saying, chances is very high that they might not consider all kind of situation in a society which we think that we should consider, whether it is you're making peace or you're making a decision of your livelihood, or you are thinking of prosperity of the community you live in, or making sure that all children, all women are included in the decision that you are making for the society or the community you live in. So I think there's two elements. Yes, technology is positive. It's great. We can ensure the leverage of technology for scientific innovation, for societal progress, but we also need to keep up to speed to prepare ourselves to guide technology and making sure that ultimate decision can be made by us who are user and who are, more importantly, beneficiaries. So you cannot take a decision on, say, when you are making a decision on a housing project in a certain area, or food production and access to food decision making process, or access to employment, without talking to those who are actually benefiting from access to food or employment or access to housing. You need to also speak to them, what is their needs and challenges and economic situation as well as you're making decision. I'm just picking examples, but it might be completely different case in your situation. Probably you are looking at something else. But I think the key point will remain that technology is a great enabler, but you need to prepare yourself and you need to guide it.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly where I stand with technology and particularly AI, because like we had discussed, I really do think what it comes down to is, we were speaking about continued learning, but there is a need for holding on to that critical thinking, that sense of, yes, you could utilize technology, but I think it's about looking into the future, not saying
Hmm.
that we could predict, exactly what's going to happen, but at least look at what could potentially be the long-term implications of our actions of utilizing AI. And that is for also, I kind of put them into two separate categories, but children and the utilization of AI with even education, but
Hmm.
then also with adults utilizing AI from
Hmm.
even a business standpoint to maybe capitalize or enhance their work. And so I think without a doubt, it is so important to look at both sides. There's pros and cons with everything that comes out that's brand new. We get so excited about it. How could we utilize it? But just as we could utilize it for good, there are
Absolutely.
also other players in the game too. So I think that's so important. And you raise an excellent point with technology. And Dr. Kabir, I want to transition. You have such an extensive background when it comes to leadership. And I'm curious just to open up, kind of transition into
Hmm.
another realm.
Sure.
But with your experience, what does effective leadership look like when we speak about like advancing justice and equality?
Sure. No, thank you very much. I will start with one point where there's a tendency among us that we sometimes uh, sort of um, look at interchangeably leadership and management. So I want to make that distinction at the beginning. Management is a critically important function, but that is not always leadership. When management is coupled with vision, and then it transition into leadership gradually, because there are very critical important parts of decision making and the implementing the decision which fall within management, right? But we loosely sometimes use them interchangeably. We call sometimes management as leadership, we call sometimes leadership as management. So I just want to make this, it is not always the absence of vision makes it management. Management is of course more into implementation part. Leadership is not only vision, but it's also looking into future, right? There are what will happen. So when you use AI for a certain things to be done faster, more efficiently, that's an application of management. But when you think about how AI can translate into much more inclusive society, that is a example of leadership or visioning, right? Now, in terms of your question about leadership, uh, what I realized in my own experiences and going through all the challenges that I have gone through is leadership has become much more collective nowadays,
Mhm.
because we have less leverage on any single point. uh, if you think about only me or us as together. Of course, people would say there are cultural differences. And let me give you an example. In North America, leadership studies focus on me and I, whereas if you look at the Eastern culture, it's much more us and we, right? Sometime when I meet if for my work from people from Eastern culture, Eastern religion, and Eastern civilization, if you, it is in Asia, Africa, Latin America, you name it. And sometimes when I exclusively discuss with North American, and whether it is in US, in Canada, and many other parts of the world, because there are northern um residents and northern citizen in south, and there are southern citizen in north as well. So it's not monolithic, right? It's quite diverse everywhere. You can't just say, okay, the country X is north, or the state Y is north. No, there is south in north and north in south, right? So it's quite mixed. We live in a world which is unprecedented because of the movement of people. That's one thing. Secondly, it becomes much more interactive and intersectional. Why I'm using intersectional? Because when you look at, say, a woman living in a rural area, she
Mhm.
uh, might be black, white. She might be preferring a certain sexual or political identity. She might have a disability or not. She might have a certain level of economic prosperity or a lack of prosperity. So you are actually looking at more than one factor. You're not looking at only a man or a woman or a children. You're looking at someone who comes from a certain city, a part of the population, certain color, certain religion, certain cultural background, certain heritage. The tendency increasing that this is us versus them, or black or white or brown, it's a misnomer because we all got mixed, not only because of our color, because of our religion, because of our civilization, because of the area we live in, because of the parental supervision we are used to, or economic prosperity we have. So I think some people might think it, oh no, we are very, very specific. I think it's important for us to enable and to expose to a multiple factors. We are all exposed to multiple factors, but sometimes we tend to think that we are in that box. And one of the reason why I sometimes look at the survey very carefully, we all receive different type of survey from federal government, from state government, right? And then you tick the box. Sometimes you identify, are you an Asian, American, ethnic, black, and you tick the box. As I tick the box, and I smile because all these people who tick one box, actually they are in multiple box. But we are always preferring one box. I understand the logic of it, but I think boxing human being in one box is often doesn't do the justice. So you spoke about how leadership can translate into justice. I think one has to be much more intersectional and opened up, and has to look beyond his or her immediate periphery. Only then you realize the challenges of civilization, or the globalization as we call it. Whether you believe in, okay, we believe in this country is the greatest nation on earth, or country XYG, because every country thinks they are the best, right? And with due respect to every country on earth, we also need to look and watch our neighbors, because you cannot just segregate yourself in this world we live in, right? Think about COVID-19. Think about any other pandemic. We initially, in many places, we thought, okay, we are untouchable because we are bordered by sea. But then we got that disease, right? And people died, sacrificed their lives. And we realized that only through exchange and collaboration we can address a global crisis or a pandemic that might hit us today or tomorrow. So that's more negative side. But even the prosperity side, positive side, leadership can only ensure justice and inclusion when it becomes much more inclusive and intersectional. So anything you do, anything you form, public policy in a city or a small town or a small village or anywhere, you always have to think about, okay, if it is a food security for a small town, uh, we also need to think about whether we can diversify the safety net for people who live in that small town, because today or tomorrow our children might be preferring certain things, certain other things which may not be produced in our small town. So if you have to go beyond other markets, what are the leverage we have, how inclusive we could be, what are the choice we are making. So I'm just giving one example, but I think just to summarize my point, if you want to really use or leverage leadership for justice, you must be intersectional, much more inclusive than we used to be.
Most certainly. And leading into my next question, I would like to know how can we better measure the real world impact of gender and disability policies?
I think the measurement, as I think I started the aspect a bit in my earlier response. Uh, if you want to measure how inclusive the society in terms of gender and disability, you look around yourself and see how accessible the world is, number one, how inclusive the world is. In my career, at the early days when I used to enter in a meeting or whether it is a board meeting or a functional meeting, I used to see lot men. Uh, Now, as we enter in workplaces, I see lot men and women. So there are certain level of gender parity has been achieved. There are certain element of gender equality has been achieved. I'm not saying this is enough, far from enough, but that's one thing. We are also seeing, thanks to many individual champions in the US, in North America, in Asia, in Latin America, in Africa, people have become much more open to accessibility. And accessibility doesn't mean only access through wheelchair, right? It's those who can't see, those who can't hear, those who can't speak. And those who can't speak, it's an interesting dynamics. It's not only about your physical ability to speak. Sometimes you can't speak because of fear. Sometimes you can't speak because of your position in the society, in the family, right? So there's a two element. One is this physical inability, which is probably easy to identify. I think the biggest challenges we face as a humanity is the fear of speaking out when we don't think that we are um, really independent to make our choices, to make our voice known to the outside world. Sometimes we are fearful of the implication, the repercussion. Sometimes we speak up, but we correct ourselves in the midway, thinking that what would be the consequence of my opinion. So we are living in a time when you have the enormous potential of technology driven by social media. Everyone has an access to the knowledge world and social media, but social media does not guarantee you also your voice and quality and access to information and right information also. So it brings other challenges as well.
Without a doubt. And I think that's so important to emphasize that point. That last point is that,
Mhm.
a lot of people they'll speak up on social media platforms. And I think it kind of goes back to our first conversation, but how important it is to understand like the truth behind everything, because anybody could say anything out there.
Mhm.
And the access of information for the most part, like very generally speaking, it's accessible. But on the flip side of the coin, I think that's why continued education, like continued learning, really challenging yourself
Mhm.
with diverse perspectives
Mhm.
is going to be critical as we move forward. And so my next question deals with vision. I love to dream big and to go after what seems almost impossible, that could you really achieve it? So my next question is, how do you turn large global goals into real change on the ground?
Mhm. This is a fascinating conversation because what you are asking now in terms of achieving large global goal is we hear it all the time in the big cities and the capitals, right? But if you go to the small city, small town, and you realize that how irrelevant those large or big global goals, because um, I would not name the country and the region. I ended up going to a remote border city. It's not in US, outside US, uh, where I ended up meeting a community where all the women were widows almost. That's one part. And then I also visited because many men who died and then women became widows, and then they also disinherited from the property, access to property, because of the lack of uh, lack of laws which really look into inclusion. at the core of the essence. So that's one, and they ended up living together. That's one thing, almost like an isolation, right? I also visited places where I suddenly saw that many women are divorces, and I said, what happened? So, okay, some husband left, and then they ended up sort of taking care of their own children, and then um, because of the unplanned migration, many men went abroad in other country, and then the women left behind. These are extreme example, of course, but the reason gave you um, these two extreme example where you saw that women face the really challenging economic circumstances, social exclusion. But you could also look at not only women, you could look at elderly men, you could look at LGBTIQ plus A, you may look at ethnic minorities, other groups, vulnerable groups, also those who are living in poverty and isolation. My own experience tell me that as big and lofty goal as we form at the uh, intergovernmental place, at the big capital, it is always critical to break down into the smaller achievable goals, which is relevant to the local government, the local cities, the small towns, the tiny villages, and where people live, and then they wake up in the morning and they look around and see what is relevant for them, whether environment is pure, whether they have job, whether they have access to food, whether they have a good school, good medication facilities and treatment facilities, and in case they need to go, whether they have transportation facilities to go quickly and faster in a place where they have a better treatment. Now, these are very basic. It sounds less imaginative or less visionary, but my vision is unless you guarantee these basic standard quality of life to those who live in remote places, far off places, distance from the capital or the beneficiary benefits of the technology and the big lofty program launched in the DC or in Geneva or in Paris, you name it, or London. Um, it doesn't matter how lofty and how big goals you have. So for me, every single big development goal, as you are rightly saying that how can we achieve big goal, I'm not undermining them at all. I think one need to start small and break down big goal into the smaller achievable details, and then how these smaller details that and the broken down goals, how these really culminate into the big goal. So one is this, are these adding up? And if they add up to, then what does it mean as a big goal? So if we say that we want a world without poverty, that's a big ask, right? Now, in our small town, are people living in a house? Do they have access to housing? Or an elderly woman, can she really go for a treatment center? Or does she have help she needs? Or if you think about a person who cannot see or read in the computer, the way the software is designed, are this software really accessible to them so that they can understand the latest news, the weather reporting and everything, right? We should not assume that everyone has access to 24/7 cable news. Many people may not have access for economic reason, or they may not have access for physical reason or psychosocial reason. Are we really making our society inclusive and prosperous, thinking about those who may not have the opportunity to achieve them? I think for me, that is the big discussion we should focus on if we want to achieve big goals. It's a kind of a reverse walking, right? Instead of, yes, big goal is important, but look from a small goal, small town, small reality towards the big goal, rather than defining a big goal at the top-down fashion and then try to say, okay, prosperity will trickle down. Prosperity does not trickle down automatically unless you make a deliberate attempt.
Excellent point. And I think without a doubt, you're right. The short-term goals and the long-term goals. So you could have that vision, but I also think you're right. It's so important to look at what is going on in those local communities and how you could impact and affect in a positive manner those local communities before you think so big. Because I feel like I could get caught, just generally speaking, about how you want to change this, like how you want to change that. And it's almost to the point where you probably will never be able to achieve it. And I think it's kind of like the carrot dangling out in front. But you're right. I think realistically, when you're talking probably, more so about policy change, how important it is to understand the lifestyle, the situation that people are living in at the local level in order to develop policy that is going to be extremely effective and
Absolutely.
pertaining to those populations. So, excellent point. And I wanted to understand, like I said, with your extensive background, how has maybe your leadership philosophy, how has it changed throughout the years? Has anything like kind of just come to mind right away where you look back even say 10, 20 years ago and you've developed so much experience, how that may have changed your leadership philosophy?
Sure. So when in my early days of career, when I was kind of passing from my law school to approaching job, at that time, it's not long ago, but even then, the world was somewhat different in the sense that people were more thinking about kind of multilateral approach might be a solution. What I am now seeing that leadership, although has become multi-pronged, but then you have also a constant tension between individualism and multilateralism, right? And it's nothing new. Don't get me wrong; it is always there in the human civilization. But what I am seeing now, increasingly more and more, you have the sort of uh, tension, built-in tension, where you are looking at community, society, and then you are talking about the individual self, right? While both are important because, as you rightly saying, the big goal and small goal, we should not make an artificial division between them, but we need to mindful of each other. In the same way, here also, individualism is extremely important because at the core, we are all one human being contributing to the greater goal or greater good or our own prosperity, right? But at the same time, there is a sense of collectiveness, and then leadership basically brings these two seemingly contested notion together. So I think increasingly what I'm seeing that teams are interconnected, they are diversely located. Of course, COVID reinforced that. One of the good thing out of this COVID isolation is people can be at different parts of the world, at home and office. So the whole traditional notion of being in the office room has broken down, right? So we are now much in that sense freer. It is always there. Work from home, work from different places has been always there, but I think there has been a formal recognition now across government and private sector and academia that best can you don't have to bring the best in the under the same roof. You can connect the best from different parts of the world, and that recognition is a good recognition of the globalization, right? So people may not be able to travel or come to one specific city for your physical ability, for your economic reason, for also lack of travel opportunity, or maybe you are just unwilling to travel or be in a certain city which you don't like. That's perfectly fine. But you can, with the application of the technology, the connectivity, as we are talking about the good of technology, this is one example of good where technology really connected us. So it is important that we always try to maintain multidisciplinary, multicultural team diversely located, and connect them all and making sure that we are inclusive in that sense, because that makes our decision making process much more not only inclusive but also improved one, because it is only through consultation we learn, and it is only through consultation and peer review and peer assist, as we call them, we sort of improve ourselves. And we thought that, okay, this is one product we develop, whether it is in science technology, whether it is in food security, whether it is in education, or whether it is in a federal facility that government is planning to launch, or whether we are building peace somewhere where conflict just ended. Um, can we really bring them both sides of the aisle? That's why even talking about conflict and peace, because now global headlines are dominated by conflicts in different parts of the world, unfortunately, but also peace building process that's happening around. It is extremely important that you bring both sides of the aisle closer. And I always remember Nelson Mandela, who was one of my leadership hero, who sort of at his own expense, he brought both element of South African society closer, right? And if you look at Mandela's vision, it's not about how long he stayed on power. Basically, he was one-term president in South Africa. He never sought a second term. But I think that one term was quite unifying, brought black and white closer, and then addressing the huge racial tension and melting pot in South Africa, and become a global icon and inspiration. I'm not saying that problems of South Africa has been addressed all, but I think he was a shining light in terms of leadership. One example. There are many other shining light in every country. So I hope that people would not hear me saying this, oh, only thinks Nelson Mandela is the hero. No, he is one of the hero, but he's one of the greatest icon of our time.
What you were speaking about in this conversation with collaboration and being able to meet people through, looking at the positive side of technology and what it has done. You're right. I mean, it connected us, and the possibility or the chances of that happening without, I mean, are probably slim to none. And so I think it really drives home the power of technology. But then when you talk about collaboration, I feel that we are definitely headed in that direction where collaboration is going to kind of amplify, because you're right. You're not necessarily stuck in a desk like the whole day, a
Yes,
cubicle. But it's a lot of, I mean, even myself, like what I'm doing with social entrepreneurship, I'm meeting so many different people with different backgrounds, different cultures, and obviously in different countries. And so it's opened my eyes to different cultures and that I probably would not be exposed to, right away. Like I said, maybe and with other opportunities, but nevertheless with technology and what it has done and what it is really driven, I think, in our society, like you said, kind of post COVID and what it has done, like it really kind of shifted. It was like a complete
absolutely.
shift in our place and the way that we communicate. And you brought up communication at the beginning, Dr. Kabir. Those are my three C's: communication, connection, and community. And I
Mm,
think it's so important, communication, the way that we communicate. And this is a fantastic, opportunity and example of being able to communicate, different perspectives, bringing together, like I said, just different cultures. So I'm glad you mentioned all of these, large themes. So my next question is, you had spoke about briefly about some of the conflict that is happening and just the uncertainty in our not only country but world for that
mhm.
matter. And so I'm just curious, from your perspective as a leader, what gives you hope for the future?
Sure. I would rather start with your last point about communication and then transition into the future you are asking me about. Um, one of my mentor in the early days used to quote, "Communicate or die." And I always smile. I said that, do you think it's so important? He said, yes, it's so important that you communicate, Monjurul. communicate well, or you die because people will misunderstand you. You'll be misunderstood, and then you would not be able to articulate what your vision is. I agree with him, but I also am seeing uh, the world we are living in, people who are communicating more, not necessarily communicating right thing, right? So there's no parallel, or there's a no given thing that, okay, he is very communicative and he is communicating well. That's a skill,
Mhm.
transferable skill you embrace, and you're using social media, knowledge platform, all the technological platform that is available today. So you can be a master of communication, and you can use and leverage all the technology platform. But if you communicate wrong things,
Mhm.
there's two things is happening in this world as we are looking around, right? So we are creating new normal. So if you continue to communicate something which are not necessarily aspirational, or something which probably undermine each other, and you communicate it routinely, daily, using all your platform, then people start getting used to those communication that are not necessarily talking about values,
Mhm.
human rights, not necessarily uplifting our beliefs, right? So if you communicate about undermining certain communities, certain colors, certain ethnicities, certain economic background, if you undermine those who cannot make certain element of money threshold, or those who are below or around the poverty line in the economic terms, then, and if you continue to repeat those communication, then you create a situation where people think that, oh, okay, this is fine, this is normal. People say all the time, we growing up hearing this, right? And then you don't object, you sometimes you don't agree, but you remain silent, and your silence becomes a kind of consent that this is the new normal. I think we live in a world now, there have been a lot of communication happening efficiently and effectively, that is actually undermining and reversing some of the societal progress that I have achieved over decades or centuries, right? So I now think back to my mentor who said, Monjurul, communicate or die. And I said that, yes, he was right, probably in his time, and he passed that mantra to me as a someone who is keen to learn. But I think I would add a word, communicate right or die, right? Uh, I'm not using the die as a dying metaphor, but I'm just saying that you have to communicate which is much more uplifting than constantly undermining each other. If you communicating right thing in terms of, okay, how can you become more, as a society, become more tolerant, more inclusive? How can we promote peace? How can you making sure that children who are going to school today remain safe in the school, or how they will come back to their home or parents with safety and with protection they need or they deserve? I'm just giving one example, but uh, there are and how can we really communicate better with each other, which will create the respect for each other. So we would not undermine anyone because of her gender or his gender, because of her caste or creed or ethnicity or color of the skin or economic uh, standing, but we respect them what they stand for as a human being. If they are saying the right thing, he or she would get our respect. If somebody is not saying the right thing, we may not have to always publicly disagree with him or her, but we can also sort of saying that, okay, I don't agree with you, so that I have that opportunity to express my opinion. At the same time, I have the opportunity to express my disagreement, and society has to respect that space. I think these are the things sometimes sound trivial, but I think we are losing some of this in many countries and societies. I don't know, Courtney, you would agree with me, but my that is my biggest concern now, that sometimes things we thought are given we are seeing them being challenged. And challenging something which have been established is not bad, because it also inspires you to do better. But if it doesn't inspire you, and if it creates much more stigma, let me put it that way, or discrimination, then it's really worrisome. And the reason I'm using the term stigma is a very deliberate choice, because sometimes in the law of any country, discrimination are defined, right? You can define this is discrimination against XYG, but sometimes stigma are not defined. It sometimes is invisible, right? So how can you really quantify or assess the stigma, and which is not good for us, but we have to work towards addressing them. So that would be my response in terms of your question, but please feel free if I did not address something that you want me to address.
No, I definitely agree with you. And you kind of sparked this thought as you were speaking of the need for dialogue. And like you were saying, I mean, if in fact somebody disagrees with you, that you could, respectfully have a conversation with them. And I've been talking a lot about this because I think when that dialogue stops, that's when kind of things go awry, to say the very least. But I think on the flip side of the coin, you have to be willing to have somebody even challenge your beliefs, because for me, an opinion could change if, in
Mm-hmm.
fact, you present evidence that really proves different from what I've known all along, or that I've researched or so forth. I'm willing to make that change. And I think that that would make a drastic change in our culture and our society if we were more willing to accept just more dialogue. I do think it would make a big difference. So I'm happy that you mentioned that point. My next question is in regards to your book. Congratulations on your book, Development Aid in Stable Democracies and Fragile States. So, what kind of directed you in this particular direction to write this book?
So uh, one of my early engagement in the international development cooperation and development system is how international cooperation can support democratic journey that different countries are undertaking. Now, there have been, of course, considerable discussion and debate whether uh, foreign guidance and support can really improve uh, a country's internal affairs, right? Um, it's always a choice of the particular community or a country what type of governance system they would prefer, what would work in their own country. Uh, Many look at um, Afghanistan and see that okay, many big power tried to enforce certain things in Afghanistan. They were at war, soldiers were being sent, people lost their lives, but it is ultimately up to Afghans to decide their fate. I'm just making an example. Similar thing you can ask about many other countries in Iraq, in Syria. There are a lot of conflict now. We are in a situation where the Middle East peace process, whether it will pursue further or not, whether all these conflicts will bring peace, will end, whether what's happening in Ukraine and Russia will end, and ultimate objective for all of us is to live in peace and harmony, and so that our children who are going out, they return home safely and they live in a world which is safer for them. So that is kind of always looking into your future generation. Are we living in a world which is would be safer, right? Now, in terms of whether we can really um, achieve through international aid and assistance is one of the things that caught my attention. And I started looking at different countries. I looked at Afghanistan. I looked at, of course, Bangladesh. I looked at uh, Kyrgyzstan. I looked at Ghana from Africa. I looked at also Serbia, which is one of the transition country in Europe. And I have looked at many other countries, but not in that greater details. But these 5 countries I have looked at in a greater details, looked at their history, their improve quality of democracy, and then choice they made, and whether there's any role for international assistance through delivered through not only through financial resources but sometimes with knowledge, right? And what I realized that it is always the indigenous knowledge that at the end of the day is critically important, the local knowledge, but local knowledge can be tremendously benefited from collaboration, from knowledge that have been tested elsewhere as well, so that you don't have to try everything in your own country, which probably would not work given that so many other countries have tried and failed. So you don't have to do the same thing where lessons learned and good practices and bad practices emerge, right? So I think that uh, exchange of knowledge, as well as sometimes very tactical and very targeted resource, which could be financial, sometimes could be also institutional support, could be mentorship, could be training of trainers, could be sharing of knowledge and lessons learned, becomes very relevant. So that's why I did this 5 country case study, plus I looked at many other, almost 15 other countries and their democratic and governance trajectory, and I saw that how a country is benefited from other countries' experience. And sometimes you may not be benefited. For example, if you look at the US system, the US electoral system is very expensive, right?
Mhm.
Whether it is a congressional process or presidential election, it's a long drawn and extremely expensive. Now, if you look at a small country, tiny country with not much economic progression, you would not prescribe a US system for them. Right? Affordability is a big issue. Timing is a big issue. And the most important thing whether the people in this country wants similar governance structure that US is really embracing for itself. Similar thing you can say in for any country within Arab states, whether Tunisia made a choice, whether that choice was equally accepted by another Arab neighbor or an Asian country, or Ghana made a choice, whether that example from Ghana would be applicable to Nepal or Bangladesh, or Bangladesh made a choice or is making a choice now, whether that choice would be resonating in Sri Lanka or Nepal, that nobody knows. Or if you think about Latin American countries or other countries, other region or African countries. So in my book, I basically looked at some of the governance structure of the country, and I saw some of the intervention, knowledge exchange, collaboration, and what are the impact of those intervention and collaboration, whether it worked or it didn't work, and what are the lessons that emerge. So
Excellent.
I think some people might like it. It's relevant, and there are a lot of knowledge collaboration and sort of exchange of information from different region culture that has taken place, and I basically looked at them and assessed and compared with each other.
No, that's absolutely wonderful. And once again, I mean, congratulations on that book. My next question before we round out everything, but what is some advice that you could provide global leaders today?
Mhm. I would say a couple of things. One is this: I think we need to remain ourselves open to uh, learn and change. The reason I'm saying this because it might sound cliche, but it is extremely important because I was looking at one of the learning study, and it tells that typically adult people don't change, and they're saying that it is at the early intervention level when children are going up, many things you can teach them, and they try to change themselves or embrace themselves. The moment we become kind of crossing 18, 20 and form our own opinion and mindset and persona, it's very difficult to change people. That's what they're saying. While that might be true, I I was reading a study. I'm not challenging that study because I also look at myself and see, okay, sometimes I also resist change. And that is because the way I have learned, I thought, okay, that works for me in the past. Why I should change? So I try to be in the comfort zone of my own comfort zone. And I believe similar thing happened with many other countries, many other people also. But what you can really do, and that's there come my piece of small advice, very humble advice, because I strongly believe that I should not, or any should not be advising others because every human situation is unique and different. But people can share information and experience, lived experience, and learn from each other. So if we remain open to learn, we may not change ourselves, but we can upgrade and update ourselves. So that doesn't mean that fundamentally what you are doing, Courtney, you may not change yourself, but you might say, okay, what happened in Spain yesterday maybe have a resonance where I am living. Now, Spain is far off from US, right? Or what happened in probably in Sri Lanka or what happened in Switzerland may have a resonance in my own country. Now, of course, Switzerland is a different typology of country, right? But then one specific lessons can be applicable to you. So my urge to the leaders would be remain open so that you can really learn from each other and possibly change for better. And if you do not want to change yourself, you embrace certain knowledge and upgrade yourself, because that upgradation process might lead to change you will not be aware of, gradual change, or you could also kind of address certain challenging behavior that other people identify in yourself, and you can say, okay, maybe I may not practice X and Y, I may apply Z, and I may continue certain other things, which probably good, or maybe not good enough, but it's fine with me. So I think it's for the leaders to make that compromise and to remain open is critical. Other management science or dictates will be relevant throughout your career or wherever you are standing as a leader. But I think the openness and acknowledging others and remain engaged and willing to learn new things are critical to me.
That is the main theme for this podcast episode, Dr. Kabir, is continuation of learning throughout one's life. And I love that you highlight the fact of being open-minded. It's so interesting that you say that, because when I started this podcast, I had the mission, I had the vision, and that was last year in June of 2024 when I launched it. But it was also that idea of being open-minded, that what could come from this. And what was so interesting, and this kind of ties back into our whole conversation, but the people that you meet along the way, you never know who you will meet and who you will be able to collaborate with. And so being open-minded to those opportunities, I think, is so critical. So I'm so happy that you mentioned open-minded, to keep open-minded, and then also continuation of learning. And so as we round out, that was very positive. But we love to always round out with either a positive message or a positive quote for our community.
Sure. And I think the quote you can always say, look at different uh, inspiring line depending on where you are in the trajectory of life. But I think in line with what I have said to you, I would just say this, that stay hungry, and maybe I would just say this thing, that read a book, even a page a day, because what I am observing that people stop reading book. They love to read social media posts, which is great. They love to look at Insta post, which is great. But whenever I ask somebody that when did you read a book cover to cover, and people then start thinking about it, and then maybe 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, you hardly hear a response that, oh, I just finished a book yesterday. You don't hear those things. You just said, oh, I read a great Facebook post, or I just saw someone share a link in X, and I just saw an Insta post, and I just saw something else. So of course those posts might lead you to knowledge, and sometimes there are links to a publication that lead you to things. But then that also makes you snappy and judgmental, because most of these things that we are posting doesn't go through a quality assurance process that used to be the process when before social media we used to send an article to a newspaper or a magazine, and then they said, oh, by the way, your article is selected, but you have to change it, and we're going through our peer review process, and do you agree if we cut your this paragraph or that paragraph? Sometimes it happens, right? And here you can post anything you want any time of the day, and you are out there in the world without being challenged. Sometimes you get the favorable like or dislike people there, but that's it. People move on immediately to next post. So the shelf life of your shared knowledge becomes hardly a few hours to a few days. Then people move on, right? So I would say that stay hungry and read a book would be my one quote. But I will also connect that to please consult, speak out, and communicate effectively and communicate the right thing, as I said before.
So important. And I just want to highlight the importance of reading. I really do. I 100% agree with you more so than ever. And when you were speaking, it reminded me of the attention span that we
Mm,
all have today. It seems like, not generalizing, but just in the sense that it has certainly become more like short. So when you speak about like Instagram posts, something that's quick, that's, straight to the point, but I also like to challenge that. I like to read books because a lot of people, like you said, are not doing that. And I think that's when you become more open to different
mhm,
perspectives. And that's, going back, essentially along the lines of that dialogue, being able to have that dialogue. And, when I'm reading, I love to be challenged. I love to think that, you may think that you know something about that topic, but boy, when you go into that book, there's so much that you don't know.
mm.
So you're right, just staying humble all the time and being willing and open to learning all
And
the
stay
time.
hungry.
And stay hungry. I like that. I really, really like that. You're right. I mean, to have that sense of purpose every morning, that you're chasing that short-term goal, you're chasing that long-term goal. I just really do. I think that's uh, it's the driving force. Like every morning when I wake up, I just get so excited. And you spoke about this, but the reason my why, if you will, of positive plenty of positivity is for those younger generations. Like what type of world are we living in now, and what type of world do we want to leave behind for these younger generations coming up? And that's what motivates me. So it's all
Mm.
about like purpose and staying hungry. So Dr. Kabir, what an honor it was to have you today on this podcast episode. I'm so incredibly grateful for your time and sharing all of your wisdom that you have today. I just want to sincerely thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Courtney. And I really enjoyed the conversation. I never felt this was a kind of interview. It's really podcast. You flow it very nicely and guide me in the conversation. Thank you very much. Please keep up the great job.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kabir.